New tonight and first at 5, KGW has learned a patient at OHSU was injured after a fire started in the hospital operating room. Thank you for joining us. I'm Laurel Porter.
And I'm David Molko. The fire sparked back in December, though we're only learning about it now after KGW started asking questions. Tonight, federal regulators have ordered the hospital to take immediate action. Investigative reporter Evan Watson is in the newsroom this evening. Evan, what do we know about how the fire started or how badly this person was injured?
David, we don't know the extent of that person's injuries. The hospital official only said the surgical patient suffered, quote, minor injuries, but couldn't say more, citing patient privacy laws. But we do know both the hospital and federal investigators launched investigations to find out exactly what went wrong. KGW has learned a patient was injured on the operating table at OHSU after a fire started while surgeons were using a cauterizing tool around flammable high-flow oxygen. The hospital acknowledged the dangerous situation this week after we started asking questions. The fire happened in December. The hospital immediately launched an investigation into what happened, and federal regulators later conducted their own investigation. The details we've learned from that follow-up offer some clues about what went wrong that day. The hospital was ordered to update its instructions on the use of high-flow oxygen, cautery equipment, and an alcohol-based antiseptic. When surgical fires happen, it often involves a combination of those three things: oxygen, a heat source, and fuel to keep it going.
It's kind of a prime situation in surgery because you're oftentimes using supplemental oxygen when a patient's under anesthesia. A lot of surgical instruments or surgical approaches use cautery or create sparks.
Brett Morgan with the American Association of Nurse Anesthesiology says the surgical community takes this risk seriously, and breakdowns in communication are often to blame. Barbara Malonga, an investigator for the nonprofit ECRI, the Emergency Care Research Institute, agrees.
Let's face it, the ignition source is handled by the surgeon usually. The oxidizer, oxygen, is handled by the anesthesiologist, and the nurse is the one that's handling, the drapes and the fuels and stuff. So that team all has to work together to prevent this risk.
However, both Morgan and Malonga say this doesn't happen often.
Very uncommon. A surgical fire is a catastrophic but rare event.
It's very rare that we get a surgical fire call that has resulted in harm.
On Monday, the federal investigators approved the hospital's plan for, quote, long-term sustained resolution. Among 65 million surgeries performed in the United States each year, ECRI estimates there are about 90 to 100 surgical fires.
The procedures that are at highest risk are those that involve the head, neck, face, and upper chest area because of the close proximity of that oxygen source on the face to the ignition source.
Morgan says in most cases, surgical fires are preventable.
This is an element of our training. It's an element of our professional development.
In a statement to KGW, OHSU said the safety of our patients and members is our top priority, and it is deeply concerning to all involved anytime there is risk of harm. Since the fire, hospital officials said they have more clearly marked when high-flow oxygen is in use and replaced the type of cauterizing tool they use around those oxygen devices. We had many other questions about the incident, but a hospital official declined our interview request, citing those patient privacy laws. David?
Pretty much the last place anyone would expect to get injured there. Evan, appreciate your reporting tonight. A person has died after they were hit late Tuesday evening by a vehicle in southeast Portland. This was near the corner of Powell and Foster. Mike Benner's across it for us tonight. Mike, this latest death means at least 4 people have now been killed in crashes in just that part of the city since the start of the new year.
Yeah, that's right, David. Safety advocates and East Portland residents alike are concerned. One of them telling me it feels as if East Portland has been forgotten.
With the way traffic was moving in southeast Powell and Foster Wednesday morning, you would have no idea this was the scene of a deadly crash just hours earlier. This woman sure did not.
I didn't hear about this one, but it's unfortunate. I mean, people just get in a hurry.
Perhaps, but perhaps not. All authorities are saying about what happened here is that officers responded to reports of a pedestrian struck by a car around 10:15 Tuesday night. That pedestrian died despite life-saving efforts by medics.
And it's unfortunate when accidents happen, and it's unfortunate when people lose their life.
All of that is true, and sadly, we're becoming too accustomed to it. Since the start of the year, there have been several deadly crashes in Portland. There was one at Southeast 92nd and Holgate early Monday morning, and another near Southeast Division and 168th in early January. Then there was one near Southeast 80th and Powell at the beginning of last week. Authorities say 44-year-old Tyler David, seen here, was behind the wheel of his Ford Escort, pulling out of a parking lot when he was hit and killed.
Let's lower the speed limit. That's going to change everything. No, it's not going to change anything.
As you can tell, she is beyond frustrated by all of the death, and she's troubled by the fact it's happening in East Portland.
I think East County, they kind of don't care about East County a little bit in a way. Portland doesn't.
As someone who drives, bikes, rides transit, and walks, as she was on this day, this woman's pleading with everyone to be more cautious. The alternative, in her eyes, is frightening.
A lot of people have just gotten more emboldened. It's just like, I'm going to run light. I'm going to go, I'm going to do whatever I want.
All right, we mentioned that crash that killed Tyler David. It just so happens that he'll be remembered tonight at a celebration of life at the Escape Bar and Grill in Northeast Portland. That's slated to start at 6:30. Back to you.
Thank you, Mike. TriMet has issued its second ever lifetime ban to the man accused in an assault at a Gresham Mac station. Police say on January 3rd, Corin Kramer attacked an elderly man and severely injured him. This was in the early morning hours when the Max wasn't running. Kramer is currently being held without bail. TriMet's first lifetime ban was against a man who committed lewd acts and sexually assaulted women multiple times on public transportation.
To our homeless crisis tonight now, where volunteers are beginning to canvass the metro area to tally how many people are living on the streets or without a permanent home. It is a yearly endeavor called the Point in Time Count. Our Blair Best joins us now. And Blair, it sounds like the county is changing things up to try to get a more accurate number here.
David, there are several changes to the count this year. One being it's the first time it will include Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties all at once. It's also the first time volunteers in Multnomah County are using an app to collect the data, which they're hoping will be more reliable. Now, while there's always gaps in this data, these changes are in an effort to get a more accurate snapshot of the homeless population. This count is required by the federal government and includes people in transitional housing and shelters. The count started Wednesday morning and ends January 31st, with more than 200 volunteers surveying people on the streets. One of the main questions they'll be asking is where they slept on the night of January 24th.
This is not meant to be an intensive, extensive research project. It is meant to be a census, a snapshot, and exactly what is happening in communities in this period of time.
Then you get different voices about what's changing out here and what needs to change out here.
Now, those behind the count are projecting to see an increase in the number of homeless people counted because of the changes that they've made to how they're collecting this data. Now, those initial results will be released this spring, and a more detailed report will come out later in the year. David, Laurel.
Thank you, Blair. And tonight, Portland's leaders are promising to keep city services up and running if more than 600 city workers walk off the job next week over a contract dispute. Now, these are union workers in the parks and transportation departments who help maintain city parks and work on sewers, streets, and sidewalks. They've been negotiating a new contract for the last 10 months, but say they're now at an impasse over cost of living raises. The union just notified the city workers could strike as soon as a week from tomorrow.
Catalytic converter thieves are causing big issues at Portland Public Schools. For months now, thieves have been stealing them from buses. Now PPS is hoping electric fencing will put a stop to it. Our Joe Ranieri joins us from Northeast Portland. Joe, and it's not just the school buses thieves have been targeting, right?
Exactly right, Laurel. It's not just these buses that are being the target over the last several months, but also the personal cars of some of these bus drivers. Now, the district tells me this is something they've been dealing with for years, but really have noticed an uptick in the increase of thefts within the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic. Now the district is hoping some big changes will put a stop to it.
In a unanimous decision on Tuesday night,
all in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no.
The Portland School Board voted to install an electric fence around their bus yard in Northeast Portland. For months, bus drivers have been concerned about the thefts that have been taking place in all hours of the day.
Catalytic converter theft, although better, is still occurring. Fuel theft and fuel tank damage is still occurring, as well as fuel card theft from the buses.
The board heard testimony from one of their drivers, Bob Foster.
Bus drivers' personal cars are now being vandalized. These incidents have occurred in broad daylight since the yards are wide open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
It's not a surprise to see how easy it is to get in. There might be barbed wire over the fence, but the gates are open all day long. Foster said that some bus drivers have had their personal cars broken into, and some have started driving around the yard on their own time.
Security is not in any PPS transportation employee's job description, and although all who perform this duty is told not to engage anyone, it still creates the possibility of a dangerous confrontation.
Brandon Coonrod, who's the assistant director of student transportation for the district, says they've already spent thousands on repairs this year.
This year alone, just in repairs to the fences, the catalytic converters, and the gas tanks, as well as fuel theft, we're probably sitting just under 30,000.
Over the next couple of months, both of the district's bus yards will soon have better protection.
For the next 5 years, we'll pay about $205,000, which is considerably less than we're spending in theft and security right now.
Against thieves.
70,000 volts. It is non-lethal, but it is definitely a healthy shock.
Now, David and Laurel, Brandon, who you just heard from, told me he's also looking at the possibility of putting gates at two of their different yards here in Northeast Portland. He also told me this is a project that could take anywhere from 2 to 2.5 months. So that means potentially by the later part of the spring, there could be fencing around these two bus yards in Northeast Portland. In Northeast Portland tonight, Joe Ranieri, KGW News.
Thank you, Joe. And you are